The Galactic Empire was vast, powerful, and ancient. It ruled thousands of star systems, each filled with life that had long accepted the Empire's dominance. When a small, newly discovered species called humans appeared on the galactic map, few in the Empire paid attention. To them, Earth was just another small planet, barely industrial, barely organized, and completely unthreatening. Reports described humans as emotional, unpredictable, and primitive. The Empire had seen countless such species before. They always fell in line sooner or later. At first, humanity seemed no different. They joined the Galactic Council quietly, spoke little in the debates, and kept most of their technology hidden. Their ships were smaller, slower, and looked outdated compared to the sleek designs of the Empire. Yet something about them unsettled a few observers. Humans didn't seem intimidated by the Empire's power. They were calm, patient, even friendly. They traded, they learned, and they studied every species they met. But behind that politeness, there was something unreadable, something that made the Empire's analysts uneasy. Still, the Empire ignored those warnings. When small disputes began over mining rights in a border region called the Epsilon Gate, the Empire decided to make an example out of humanity. A small Terran outpost had refused to hand over its mining operation to an imperial corporation. The Empire's admirals saw it as a perfect opportunity to remind the newcomers who ruled the stars. They called it a disciplinary campaign. A massive fleet was assembled, hundreds of warships, battlecruisers, and carriers. For the Empire, it wasn't even considered a major deployment. The admirals laughed when they saw Earth's meager defense numbers. According to intelligence, the humans had only one standing fleet in that region, no more than 100 ships, many of them outdated. The Empire's commander promised his soldiers an easy victory. He told them the humans would surrender within hours. But as the Imperial Armada entered Terran-controlled space, the situation immediately began to feel strange. There were no radio transmissions, no diplomatic messages, and no visible ships welcoming or warning them. Space around the Epsilon Gate was silent. The humans had gone completely dark. Imperial ships began to scan the system, searching for the small defense force they expected to crush. They found nothing, no bases, no fleets, just silence. Then out of nowhere, a human signal broke through the static. It wasn't a plea for peace or negotiation. It was a simple message, short and direct. You are entering restricted Terran space. Turn back immediately. The Empire's commander laughed. He broadcasted his response to all channels, mocking the humans. This is Imperial territory now. You will obey. The message was barely finished when sensors detected hundreds of human ships decloaking near the asteroid field. They were smaller than Imperial vessels, but their formation was perfect. Too perfect. Before the Empire could react, the humans opened fire. The first volley came like thunder. Kinetic slugs, solid metal projectiles traveling near light speed, tore through the Empire's shields like paper. Explosions lit up the darkness as cruisers and destroyers went up in flames. The humans didn't speak again. They didn't taunt, didn't gloat. They just fought with deadly precision. Every Imperial officer expected them to retreat after a few losses. But the humans didn't retreat. They kept pushing, using coordinated tactics that the Empire had never seen before. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed chaotic at first, but quickly revealed a deadly rhythm. Every time an Imperial vessel turned to target one group of humans, another came from behind to strike. The Empire's fleet had numbers and technology, but the humans had something far more dangerous: discipline and experience. They fought like people who had been doing this for centuries, like war was something woven into their history. And in truth, it was. In less than 6 hours, nearly half of the Imperial fleet was gone. Entire formations vanished in fire. The commander's confidence turned to disbelief, then to fear. How could such a small force cause so much damage? The humans' weapons were crude by galactic standards, yet somehow more effective. Their missiles never missed, their railguns tore through armor, and their targeting systems seemed almost alive, predicting every Imperial maneuver before it happened. Desperate to regain control, the commander ordered his ships to fall back and regroup. That's when the humans stopped firing. A single transmission came through, sent directly to the Imperial flagship. The voice was calm, almost emotionless. Ceasefire and withdraw. This was your warning. The commander, trembling, demanded to know who was speaking. The reply was quiet, chilling. You just fought our border defense unit. The communication ended. The humans didn't chase the retreating fleet. They just disappeared into the darkness again, leaving wreckage behind. When the surviving ships limped back to Imperial space, the reports shocked the entire military command. An entire strike force destroyed by what was supposed to be a minor planetary race. The losses were too high to explain. Analysts tried to find reasons that made sense. Maybe the humans had used illegal weapons. Maybe they'd received help from another galactic faction. Anything was better than the truth, that they'd been completely outmatched. The council met in emergency session. Angry voices filled the great chamber. How could a species that had barely joined the galactic community do this? The admirals claimed the humans must have concentrated all their military power in that one region. That was the only explanation that didn't make them look weak. They threw everything they had at us, one general said. They can't have any more ships left. But deep down, no one believed that. Across the Empire, rumors began to spread, quiet whispers among soldiers and civilians. Stories of human fleets moving silently across the border, of secret bases hidden in asteroid belts, of technology no one had seen before. A few Imperial captains who had faced the humans firsthand spoke about how their ships seemed to know what the Empire would do next. They think differently, one survivor said. They fight like they've already lost everything once and they'll never let it happen again. The Empire tried to bury those reports, but fear had already taken root. Even in the capital, citizens began to speak cautiously about the humans. Some called them dangerous, others called them necessary allies. But most agreed on one thing: no one wanted to face them again. Meanwhile, Earth remained silent. No press conferences, no declarations, no victory speeches. The Terran government released no official statement. Their ships quietly returned to their stations. Factories on Mars and the Moon worked around the clock, but no one outside the solar system knew what they were building. In the quiet halls of the Terran Defense Command, officers reviewed the battle logs. They spoke little. For them, Epsilon Gate wasn't a triumph, it was a test. A small unit had been sent to measure how far the Empire was willing to go. And the results were exactly what they expected. One officer finally broke the silence in the room. They think that was our full defense line. The others exchanged faint smiles. They knew what was coming next. Far beyond the Empire's borders, hidden deep in the uncharted systems, massive fleets slept in silence. Thousands of ships, their hulls dark, their weapons cold, waiting for orders that hadn't yet come, and somewhere, far away on Earth, someone looked up at the stars, not in fear, but in quiet understanding. Humanity had been underestimated before. They were used to it. But this time, the galaxy was about to learn the same lesson every would-be conqueror in human history had learned: that humans only looked weak until they were provoked. For now, though, they waited. They repaired their ships, honored their dead, and studied the Empire's every move. They knew the Empire would return, pride would demand it, and when it did, the humans would be ready. Because what the Empire had faced at Epsilon Gate wasn't an army, it was just a small part of one, and the galaxy hadn't seen humanity's true strength yet. The news of the defeat at Epsilon Gate spread faster than light. In every corner of the Galactic Empire, people were talking about the humans, this strange small species from the edge of the stars that had somehow crushed an Imperial strike fleet. Many refused to believe it. Impossible, they said. No primitive world could do that. But the wreckage floating near the Epsilon system told another story. Hundreds of Imperial ships reduced to twisted metal, drifting silently in space. The Empire's generals called it an unfortunate tactical error. The officials blamed communication breakdowns, navigation issues, anything to hide the truth. But those who had survived the battle couldn't stay silent. They spoke in whispers in dark corners of military outposts, telling the same story again and again. They were faster than us, one said. They fought like they already knew our plans. Another swore he saw human ships take hits that should have destroyed them, only for them to keep fighting as if nothing had happened. Back on Earth, things were quiet. Humanity didn't celebrate. There were no parades, no public broadcasts of victory. To outsiders, it almost looked like the humans didn't even care. But behind that silence, something huge was happening. Factories on Mars worked day and night. Massive cargo ships carried supplies between the moons of Jupiter. Military academies expanded, training more officers and engineers. But the strangest part was this: there was no sign of fear. Humanity had just survived a fight with one of the strongest empires in the galaxy. and instead of hiding, they were preparing for something bigger. Inside the Empire, panic started to grow. The council called an emergency meeting. The grand chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of star systems, all shouting over each other. The Emperor's advisors demanded to know how such a disaster could happen. Intelligence officers tried to explain that humanity must have concentrated all their ships in one region. That was the only logical reason. They used everything they had, one analyst said, pointing at the data. It's impossible for them to have more fleets. Their shipbuilding capacity is limited. But then a young officer, pale and trembling, entered the chamber. He carried a data core, recovered from a spy probe near Terran space. The council ordered him to show the footage. The holo display flickered to life, showing something that froze the room. There were shipyards, hundreds of them, stretching across Mars's orbit. Each one held massive vessels under construction. Drones moved like ants over their hulls, welding, connecting, testing. The ships were nothing like the small defense fleet seen at Epsilon Gate. These were giants, towering, heavily armored, armed to the teeth. In the background, other stations orbited Jupiter, mining its moons and refining materials. Someone in the chamber whispered, "How long have they been building this?" No one could answer. Then came another image, a massive industrial platform hidden behind Saturn's rings. It wasn't on any official chart. The humans had built it in secret, right under the council's nose. The facility was producing engines larger than any the Empire had ever seen. The Emperor's advisors stared in disbelief. For centuries, the Empire had controlled the galaxy through intimidation. No species dared to challenge them. Yet here was a civilization that not only fought back, but was quietly preparing for a full-scale war. The Emperor's military chief broke the silence. "If this is true," he said, "then Epsilon Gate wasn't a battle. It was a test." Across the galaxy, Imperial propaganda tried to keep the people calm. Official news channels called it a minor conflict exaggerated by rumors. They claimed the humans had begged for peace. But the soldiers who had seen the battle knew better. They had seen the way human ships fought, the way their captains stayed calm even as the sky burned. The humans didn't act like victims. They acted like professionals, like survivors. Meanwhile, the human fleets were quietly regrouping. The damaged ships were repaired in record time. The crews didn't rest, they trained harder. Simulations ran day and night across Earth's orbital bases, analyzing every move the Empire had made. The humans weren't celebrating victory. They were studying it, improving it. They knew the Empire would come again. Pride would demand revenge, and humans understood pride very well. They'd seen it countless times in their own history. Empires always struck back. On Earth, an emergency meeting was held by the Terran Defense Command. Around the table sat men and women who had once been soldiers, engineers, and explorers. Their faces were calm, serious. One of them spoke softly. "The Empire will not accept defeat. They'll return with more ships. We need to be ready before they cross the border again." Another officer nodded. "They think Epsilon was our full fleet. That's what's keeping them cautious. Let's make sure they keep believing that." And so humanity began its quiet expansion. Colonies that had once been peaceful turned into military hubs. Asteroid belts became weapon depots. Even the outer moons of Neptune hosted hidden defense grids. Everything was done in silence. Every move, every construction was disguised as civilian work. To outsiders, humanity looked calm. But beneath that calm was the sound of engines being tested, of cannons being forged, and of a civilization preparing for the storm it knew was coming. Inside the Empire, fear turned into anger. The Council wanted to send another fleet larger this time. They called it Operation Iron Hand. The plan was to crush the humans completely before they grew stronger. But not everyone agreed. Some commanders who had seen the first battle refused to go back. One captain said quietly, "You don't understand them. They fight like they've already lived through extinction." Still, pride won over reason. The Empire began gathering ships again, thousands this time. Every corner of Imperial space contributed. The Emperor promised that this would be the final war, that the humans would either kneel or vanish. The propaganda machine screamed victory before the battle had even begun, but the humans were watching. They saw everything. Their deep space sensors picked up every movement of the Imperial fleet. They didn't interfere. They didn't threaten. They waited. Humanity's greatest strength was patience. While the Empire moved loudly, showing off its power, the humans stayed silent, hidden, and ready. In the weeks that followed, human scouts observed something strange among the Imperial ranks. Some alien species that served the Empire began to question their loyalty. The story of Epsilon Gate had spread too far to control. The smaller races, long oppressed by the Empire, had seen what humans could do. A rumor began to grow. A whisper that maybe the humans could stand against the Empire and maybe others could too. On one outer colony world, an old miner spoke to his friend while watching a human news feed. "They say those Terrans destroyed a whole fleet," he said. His friend laughed nervously. "If that's true, maybe it's time someone finally made the Empire afraid." Back on Earth, that was exactly what the humans wanted. They didn't seek glory or conquest. They wanted peace, but they knew peace could only come through strength. So they built more. Massive carriers that could cross galaxies, warships with weapons capable of bending light, AI-controlled drones that could move faster than any pilot. Humanity's technology, once underestimated, was evolving faster than anyone thought possible. Still, every commander on Earth remembered one simple rule: never start the war, but always finish it. The Empire's fleet continued to gather near the border, unaware that they were walking straight into another lesson. Humanity didn't need to attack first. They simply waited for arrogance to do its work, and arrogance was something the Empire had in abundance. Late one night, as the stars over Earth shimmered quietly, a small message was sent from Terran Command to all fleet captains across known space. It contained only 6 words: Phase 2, maintain silence, await signal. In deep space, countless human ships powered up their engines. Their lights stayed off. Their weapons remained cold. But every captain knew what those words meant. The second act was about to begin, and somewhere deep in the heart of the Galactic Empire, a few wise voices whispered what the rest refused to hear. If that first fleet wasn't their full army, then may the stars help us when we meet the real one. Inside the shining capital of the Galactic Empire, the mood had changed completely. Only months ago, the halls of the Imperial Council had been filled with pride and arrogance. The Empire believed itself unbeatable, but after the defeat at Epsilon Gate, the same halls now echoed with silence and tension. Everyone had seen the reports. The Empire had lost hundreds of ships to a small human fleet. The numbers didn't make sense. The story didn't make sense. And yet, it had happened. The Emperor's advisors gathered again inside the High Council chamber. Around the massive table sat the most powerful minds in the galaxy: admirals, scientists, intelligence chiefs. Holograms of destroyed ships floated in the air between them, pieces of wreckage spinning slowly in the light. The room was thick with unease. One of the generals slammed his fist on the table. "We are the Empire. We have ruled for 10,000 years. Are we really saying that a single new species can humiliate us?" No one answered. They all remembered the footage of human ships weaving through their fleet, attacking with impossible precision. They had seen the wreckage of Imperial cruisers torn apart by railgun fire. They had heard the final message sent by the humans: "You just fought our border defense unit." That message haunted them. An intelligence officer stood up and spoke carefully. "We have reviewed the recordings from the battle. We believe we underestimated their coordination. Their ships appear smaller, but their targeting systems are frighteningly accurate. It's as if every pilot knows exactly what the others are doing at every moment." "Are you saying they have hive minds?" one of the council members asked. "No," the officer replied quietly. "They just trust each other." That answer left the room speechless. Trust was something rare in the Empire, where fear and control kept order. But in the Terran fleet there was unity, a kind of teamwork that even the most advanced empire couldn't copy. Still, the council could not afford to appear weak. They voted to send another larger fleet. The new operation was called Restoration. The Empire would restore its pride by crushing humanity completely. The plan was simple: invade, occupy, and erase. But not everyone in the council agreed. A few older members, veterans of ancient wars, warned against rushing in again. One of them said quietly, "They're not what they seem. The humans fight like they've been doing this longer than we have. Maybe they've faced extinction before. Maybe they're used to it." The warning was ignored. Pride had taken control of the Empire again. While the new fleet was being prepared, strange things began happening across Imperial space. Merchant ships traveling near Terran borders disappeared without a trace. Outposts went silent. Patrols sent to investigate never returned. Some believed the humans were striking back in secret. Others thought the Empire's own soldiers were deserting, too afraid to face the Terrans again. But the truth was simpler and scarier. The humans weren't attacking. They were watching. Every time an Imperial ship entered their space, human scouts shadowed them silently. Every movement, every frequency, every ship design was recorded and sent back to Earth. Humanity was learning everything about the Empire, its weaknesses, its tactics, its overconfidence. On Earth, the mood was calm and focused. Inside Terran Command, officers studied star maps covered in glowing markers. They analyzed the Empire's fleet patterns, identifying gaps and weak points. Factories across Mars worked nonstop, building new ships in secret. AI-controlled drones helped assemble giant carriers piece by piece in deep space, where Imperial sensors couldn't reach. One strategist looked at the data and said quietly, "They're going to attack again. This time with everything they have." Another replied, "Good, let them come." The humans weren't afraid. They had learned something the Empire never understood. Numbers didn't win wars. Will did. The Empire had more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. But the humans had unity, patience, and a reason to fight. They didn't fight for conquest. They fought to protect home. Weeks passed and the Empire's new fleet was ready. It was the largest deployment in centuries. Thousands of ships, all armed and waiting near the Terran border. The Admiral spoke proudly to the media, claiming the human problem would soon be over. Citizens across the Empire cheered, trying to believe it. But behind the cheering, fear lingered. The word Epsilon had become a curse. Meanwhile, in the dark silence of space, humanity was ready. Hidden bases near Pluto tracked every movement of the Imperial fleet. Advanced stealth ships, invisible to scanners, floated quietly among asteroid fields, transmitting live data to Earth. The humans knew the Empire's plans before the Empire even executed them. One night, as the Imperial Armada prepared to enter Terran space, strange interference hit their communication systems. The admirals grew nervous. "It's just solar radiation," one of them said. But it wasn't. The humans were jamming their signals, slowly, subtly, cutting them off from one another without them realizing it. Then, out of nowhere, the stars ahead seemed to flicker. Hundreds of tiny dots appeared on the radar. The admiral leaned forward, frowning. "What is that?" A young officer replied, his voice shaking. "Sir, those are ships." Before anyone could react, the dots multiplied. Hundreds became thousands. The Terran fleet had arrived, massive, silent, and perfectly organized. They didn't send warnings or demands. They didn't speak at all. They just moved forward. The first shots fired from the Imperial side. The space between the two fleets erupted in blinding light. Explosions rippled through the darkness. But this time, the humans didn't stay still. They moved like a living wave, every formation supporting the other. The Empire's numbers meant nothing. Their communication was broken, their formations confused. Within minutes, Imperial cruisers began falling apart under precise, coordinated attacks. Human ships darted between them, striking fast and disappearing before anyone could retaliate. Every move the Empire made was countered before it even began. It was as if the Terrans were reading their minds. The Admiral tried to regain control, screaming orders that no one could hear through the interference. On his screen, ship after ship went dark. Then suddenly his sensors picked up something enormous. A shadow moved through space, larger than any ship he had ever seen. It was one of Earth's new Titan-class warships, armed with rail cannons that could fire projectiles the size of buildings. The Admiral watched in horror as the giant turned its weapons toward his command ship. The blast came like a flash of daylight. His fleet vanished in seconds. When the battle was over, only a few Imperial ships managed to escape. The rest were either destroyed or disabled. As the survivors drifted away, a single transmission reached them, a calm human voice. "You attacked again," the voice said. "Now you know what happens when you try twice." The message ended. Back in the Imperial capital, chaos broke out again. The Council demanded answers. How could this happen again, and this time with an even larger fleet? The analysts had no explanation. Every calculation said the humans should have been overwhelmed. But somehow they'd won even faster than before. Then, one intelligence report reached the Council. a simple document that made the entire room fall silent. The analyst's voice trembled as he read it aloud. Based on intercepted transmissions, the human fleets we fought today represent only regional commands. Their central forces have not yet deployed. The Emperor leaned back slowly, his eyes wide. You mean? Yes, the analyst said quietly. That wasn't their full army. The chamber went completely still. For the first time in history, the Galactic Empire, ruler of thousands of worlds, felt real fear. Outside, across the galaxy, that fear spread like wildfire. Small nations began to whisper of rebellion. Former slaves of the Empire started to dream of freedom. If humans could fight the Empire and survive, maybe others could too. In one of the outer colonies, a worker looked up at the night sky and said softly, "Maybe they're not the monsters we thought. Maybe they're the ones we've been waiting for." And deep in Terran space, far from the noise of politics and fear, humanity continued its quiet work. The factories still glowed, the shipyards still built, and the commanders still waited. They didn't know it yet, but the galaxy had already changed forever. Because for the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire was afraid. And it was afraid of humans. Across the galaxy, fear had started to take root. The Empire had lost 2 major battles against humanity, and now even the most loyal citizens whispered in secret about the strange species from the blue planet. In the bars of distant colonies, in the quiet mess halls of imperial stations, the same question was being asked again and again. Who are these humans? And what else are they hiding? The Empire had never known such embarrassment. For centuries, their power had gone unchallenged. Entire civilizations bowed to them without question. But now their pride had been shattered. Every report that came from the front lines told the same story. Human tactics that defied logic, fleets appearing from nowhere, ships that fought as if they were alive. The Emperor called for complete secrecy. The truth could not reach the public. The official announcement was carefully worded. A border disturbance with an emerging species has been resolved. But everyone knew it wasn't true. The wreckage floating across multiple systems, the loss of entire fleets, those couldn't be hidden. The galaxy was watching, and it was starting to believe that the impossible had happened. The Empire had finally met its match. Inside the Imperial Palace, the High Command gathered once more. Holograms of destroyed fleets flickered before them. The air was tense. A cold silence filled the room as one officer after another admitted what none of them wanted to say. "We underestimated them," said one. "Their ships are built for endurance, not beauty. Their crews fight until the very end." Another added, "They don't fight like us. They don't rely on rank or fear. Every soldier, every pilot acts with purpose, like they all understand what must be done." The Emperor sat still, saying nothing for a long time. Finally, he asked, "How many ships do they have?" No one answered at first. Then the intelligence chief spoke softly. "We don't know." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean you don't know?" "Your Majesty," the officer said, voice trembling. "Our scans show construction sites across multiple systems. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond. They have shipyards hidden even in the asteroid belts. Every time we estimate their numbers, more appear. They have learned how to hide from us." For the first time in his life, the Emperor felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Doubt. Meanwhile, far away on Earth, the human leadership was calm. There were no speeches, no cheering, no signs of celebration. In a simple underground control room, the commanders of the Terran Defense Network met quietly. Screens around them displayed maps of the galaxy, covered with Imperial patrol routes and fleet movements. The humans had eyes everywhere now. One of the officers spoke softly. "The Empire's pride is cracked. But pride doesn't die easily. They'll come again, stronger, more desperate." Another replied, "Let them. Every time they come, we learn more. They still think they're fighting our border fleets." Everyone in the room understood what that meant. So far, humanity had used only a fraction of its forces. The majority of their ships, massive war fleets, were still docked deep inside uncharted sectors, untouched and unseen. On Mars, massive factories hummed endlessly. Gigantic engines were being built for ships that would soon dwarf anything the galaxy had ever known. Around Jupiter, mining stations stripped the gas giant's moons for rare materials while AI drones worked day and night without rest. The humans didn't just build, they adapted. Every scrap of technology they captured from the Empire was studied, improved, and rebuilt in human style. But despite their growing strength, Earth's leaders agreed on one thing. They wouldn't start the next battle. They would wait for the Empire to make the next move. It was not arrogance, but strategy. The longer the Empire hesitated, the more time humanity had to prepare. Still, among the people of Earth, rumors were spreading. Civilians whispered about the enormous ships being built in orbit, the new defense platforms rising from the oceans, the strange silence of the government. Everyone knew something big was coming. Some were afraid, others felt a strange kind of pride. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't the small one anymore. They were standing toe-to-toe with an empire that ruled the stars, and winning. In the outer colonies of the empire, unrest began to grow. The smaller species, long crushed under imperial rule, started to see hope in the humans. Secretly, they passed messages through black market channels. The Terrans fought them, one message read. They fought them and lived. On a distant mining world, a worker looked at the stars and said to his crew, "If they can stand up to the Empire, maybe we can too." And that was how rebellion started, not with armies, but with whispers. Back in the imperial capital, those whispers were causing panic. The Emperor demanded an information lockdown. News of the human victories was forbidden to circulate. But it was already too late. The truth traveled faster than light. In a darkened room, the Imperial Council met once more. This time, the atmosphere was different. There was fear in their eyes. Reports showed that hundreds of frontier worlds had started to refuse orders from the central government. Supplies were delayed, loyalty was fading. The Empire was cracking from the inside. One council member shouted, "All of this because of them, because of humans. We must destroy them before they destroy us." But the intelligence chief spoke again, his voice flat. "Destroy them? We don't even know where all their fleets are. Every time we think we found their command base, they appear somewhere else. It's as if they can be anywhere they want, at any time." That statement made everyone fall silent. Later that night, the Emperor stood alone on his balcony, staring at the stars. He had spent his life believing his empire was eternal, that nothing could threaten it. Now, for the first time, he wondered if that was a lie. He thought about the humans, those fragile creatures who looked so small and weak, and yet somehow had defied him twice. He couldn't understand them. What gave them such strength? What made them fight so fiercely? On Earth, the answer was simple. Humanity had always fought for survival, from ancient wars to famine to disasters. They had learned through pain and struggle that survival was earned, not given, and now that same spirit was guiding them through the stars. In a secret Terran base located on one of Saturn's moons, technicians worked on something massive. It wasn't just another ship. It was something new, something powerful enough to change the balance of the galaxy. It was a fusion of human engineering and captured Imperial technology, a new class of warship that would be unstoppable. The workers didn't talk much about what they were building, but among them, it was simply called Project Horizon. At the same time, deep in the asteroid belt, human intelligence officers had successfully infiltrated the Empire's communication network. Every coded message, every troop movement, every ship launch, human command knew it before the Empire itself did. It wasn't magic. It was patience, skill, and determination. The Empire had no idea how deep the humans' reach had become. They still believed the humans were reactive, only defending. They didn't realize humanity was already shaping the next phase of the war from the shadows. One Terran strategist looked at the data spread across the hollow table and said quietly, "They think they're hunting us, but they're walking straight into our net." The humans were no longer just defending. They were preparing for the day when they would strike back, not for revenge, but to end the threat once and for all. In the Imperial capital, unrest was growing stronger. Minor rebellions started breaking out in the outer systems. Ships carrying the Empire's banner were being hijacked. Some soldiers even deserted, seeking refuge in human-controlled territories. The idea of Terran protection had started to spread. For the first time in history, smaller worlds weren't afraid to say no to the Empire. The Emperor couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that same sentence from the battle reports in his mind. That wasn't their full army. He had dismissed it at first as psychological warfare, a bluff. But now, as more evidence appeared, he began to realize the horrifying truth. If what they had faced so far were just border fleets, then what would happen when humanity sent its main force? And somewhere out in the deep black of space, far from any star, the answer was waiting. Entire Terran battle groups resting in silence, their engines cold, their weapons sleeping. But when the signal came, they would wake. Because humanity wasn't just defending anymore. They were preparing to end the war on their own terms. And when they finally moved, the galaxy would never forget it. The galaxy was tense. Every system under the Empire's rule was on edge. Rumors of human fleets moving in secret, of destroyed patrols, and hidden Terran bases had spread like wildfire. Imperial commanders tried to maintain control, but fear had crept into the hearts of even the most experienced officers. The name Epsilon Gate had become a symbol of shame, a reminder that humanity had defeated them not once but twice. In the outer sectors, Imperial patrols grew nervous. They followed their usual routes, scanning for human activity, but something was different. Signals were missing, coordinates seemed altered, and in every sector they entered, humans appeared to be one step ahead. Ships vanished without warning, sometimes leaving only a single piece of wreckage behind. Those who survived returned terrified. Speaking of fleets appearing from nowhere, cloaked ships striking with deadly precision, even the most confident officers began to question themselves. Back on Earth, the Terran Defense Command was calm. Every movement, every ship deployment, and every patrol was planned carefully. Humanity had learned patience over centuries of survival. They did not attack without reason. They did not show strength unnecessarily. Instead, they watched, studied, and prepared. Every Imperial move was catalogued, analyzed, and countered. Every fleet, every base, and every patrol had a purpose. One of the Terran commanders reviewed the Imperial fleet positions. "They think they're coming for us," he said, pointing at the map. "They don't know how prepared we really are." Another officer nodded. "They believe Epsilon Gate was a warning. They have no idea that was only the beginning." Human fleets were positioned strategically across the galaxy. The ships that had already fought and survived were repaired, upgraded, and redeployed. Entire sectors, previously quiet and unmonitored, now held massive hidden fleets ready to move at a moment's notice. Each fleet had a specific role: one to defend, one to strike, one to observe, and one to create diversions. Even the smallest patrols were coordinated like pieces of a larger puzzle, moving with precision that no Empire fleet could predict. Meanwhile, the Empire gathered what they believed to be an unstoppable force. Thousands of ships, the largest assembly in the Empire's history, moved toward Terran space. Every officer was certain of victory this time. The previous failures, they assumed, had been due to underestimation and bad luck. This time, they would overwhelm humanity completely. But humans were ready. They didn't rush into battle. They didn't try to match the Empire ship for ship. Instead, they used intelligence and strategy to manipulate the flow of conflict. Advanced stealth ships moved quietly, intercepting communications and monitoring fleet movements. Decoys were placed in uninhabited sectors to confuse the enemy. Every Imperial fleet that crossed into Terran space unknowingly entered a carefully prepared trap. In the command center on Mars, an officer explained, "The Empire is walking into multiple zones of engagement. They don't know it yet, but every step they take brings them closer to disaster." The Empire's leaders, on the other hand, remained overconfident. They believed that sheer numbers would crush humanity. They underestimated patience and strategy. They assumed that humanity's earlier victories were anomalies, not the result of careful planning and discipline. The first engagement began in the Callisto sector. A fleet of Imperial destroyers entered what they believed was empty space, but they were immediately ambushed. Human ships struck from multiple directions, using hidden asteroid belts and cloaked ships to create chaos. The Imperials were forced to retreat in confusion. Signals were jammed and orders were ignored. One of the surviving officers reported later, "It was like they could anticipate every move. They didn't just react, they controlled the battle." While this small-scale victory took place, larger Terran fleets remained hidden in deep space. Their ships were massive, heavily armed, and equipped with experimental technologies that the Empire had never seen. These forces were being positioned to strike at critical points once the Imperial fleets were lured into place. The humans understood the Empire's weaknesses. They studied the hierarchy, the reliance on communication chains, and the pride that often clouded judgment. Every battle was designed not only to protect humanity, but to expose flaws in the Imperial system. By forcing Imperial fleets into confusing engagements, humans were teaching themselves and preparing for the larger conflicts to come. On one hidden base near Saturn, a team of engineers worked tirelessly. They were assembling new warships, testing advanced weapons, and calibrating long-range cannons. Every system was monitored by AI to ensure maximum efficiency. Yet, despite the scale of the operation, the atmosphere remained calm and professional. There was no panic, no rushing. Every decision was deliberate. A strategist reviewing the battle patterns said quietly, "They will not expect the main force. They will assume these are all our fleets, but when the full strength emerges, it will be overwhelming." At the same time, the Empire was losing confidence. Officers who had once been proud of their positions began to question their orders. The scale of human preparedness was unlike anything they had imagined. Even minor engagements were proving that the humans were not only reactive but proactive in ways the Empire could not counter. Rumors began to spread among the Empire's citizens as well. Stories of invisible human fleets and battles with no survivors reached even the outer systems. Smaller worlds, long under Imperial rule, started asking questions. Some secretly prepared for rebellion, believing that if humans could stand against the Empire, perhaps they could too. Fear of humanity was now coupled with hope among the oppressed. The Empire's Central Command tried to maintain morale. Propaganda painted the humans as a threat to be contained, not as a force capable of defeating the Empire. But the reports from the front lines contradicted every message. Ships were destroyed, patrols vanished, and the numbers of Imperial casualties grew. Back on Earth, humanity's leadership was focused. They understood the scale of what was happening, but they never allowed overconfidence to take hold. They knew the Empire would eventually realize that these were only preliminary fleets, and that their main forces had yet to face humanity. This knowledge guided every decision, every deployment, and every engagement. The turning point came in the Antares sector. An Imperial fleet, one of the largest assembled, encountered hidden Terran forces. The humans did not engage immediately. Instead, they observed, learning the fleet's patterns, weaknesses, and formations. Then, when the timing was perfect, they struck. The result was catastrophic for the Empire. Imperial ships were caught off guard, communication chains broken, and commanders forced to make desperate decisions. Within hours, dozens of ships were destroyed and the rest retreated in disorder. Reports described it as chaotic, precise, and terrifying. Afterward, survivors spoke of human tactics they could not understand. Ships appeared where none had been. Fire came from every direction, yet humans seemed unharmed. Every attempt to regroup was met with overwhelming force. One officer reported, "It's as if they know what we're thinking before we think it ourselves." Back in the Imperial capital, panic replaced anger. The Emperor demanded answers, but the intelligence reports only confirmed what everyone feared. The humans were not only prepared, they were vastly underrepresented. What the Empire had faced so far were only regional fleets, not the core forces that humanity had hidden across the galaxy. A council member finally said aloud what no one wanted to admit. If these are only part of their forces, then what else do they have? No one answered. The room fell silent. For the first time, the Galactic Empire realized that the humans they had fought and feared were only a fraction of the true strength hidden beyond the borders. Meanwhile, humanity continued its quiet work. Ships were repaired, new fleets were prepared, and strategies refined. Each engagement taught lessons that would be applied in the larger conflict to come. The humans did not boast. They did not celebrate. They prepared. They waited. And when the time came, they would show the Empire the full extent of their power. The message was simple, and yet terrifying. What the Empire had faced so far was only a prelude. The main force, the one that had remained hidden, would arrive when the humans chose, not when the Empire demanded. And when it did, The galaxy would witness something no one had ever seen before. Because for the first time in history, the Empire understood the truth. Humanity's full strength was still out there, waiting, patient, and ready. The galaxy had changed forever. The Imperial fleets that had once ruled without question were now scattered, confused, and fearful. Every system under Imperial control had been touched by the whispers of human power. Even worlds that had once been loyal and obedient began to question the Empire's strength. The victories humanity had achieved at Epsilon Gate and beyond were only the beginning. What the Empire did not know and could not imagine was the scale of the forces that humans had kept hidden until the right moment. Deep in Terran space, massive fleets lay in wait. They were the largest ever assembled by humanity, stretching across multiple star systems, hidden behind asteroid fields, orbiting uncharted planets, and cloaked by advanced stealth technologies. Every ship, from small scouts to colossal warships, had been prepared for one purpose: to end the threat of the Empire once and for all. In the command centers on Earth, officers reviewed holographic maps with meticulous detail. Imperial fleets were approaching, unaware of what lay in store. Every movement, every formation, and every route had been anticipated. Humanity had studied the Empire for months, learning their strategies, their weaknesses, and their pride. They knew the Empire would strike first, relying on numbers and arrogance to try to crush them. And humanity was ready. One of the Terran commanders said quietly, "They think we are small. They think Epsilon Gate was our full strength. They have no idea what is waiting for them." Another nodded. "Let them come. Every move they make brings them closer to disaster." The humans did not attack immediately. Instead, they let the Imperial fleets enter carefully chosen sectors, leading them into a web of observation points, hidden ambushes, and traps. Signals were jammed, communications intercepted, and every fleet movement recorded. By the time the Imperials realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The first real engagement of humanity's main force began near the outer edge of the Epsilon system. Imperial scouts reported hundreds of Terran ships appearing out of nowhere, striking from directions they had not considered. Then from the shadows, massive warships, the Titan class, emerged, dwarfing anything the Empire had ever built. Their weapons fired with devastating accuracy, tearing through enemy cruisers and destroying carriers that had once seemed invincible. Imperial commanders were stunned. This was not a repeat of past battles. The humans had escalated beyond imagination. Every maneuver the Empire attempted was countered before it could succeed. Orders shouted across the fleet went unheard, as systems were disabled and formations broken. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, almost as if the fleet itself were alive. Within hours, entire Imperial squadrons had been obliterated. The survivors fled in panic, attempting to regroup in sectors they assumed were safe. But human scouts were already in position. Every escape route had been calculated and prepared. The Empire was being pushed back, systematically, efficiently, and without mercy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, commanders observed every movement in real time. Their strategy was simple but deadly. Strike with overwhelming force where the Empire was weakest, then retreat to safety, forcing the enemy to overextend and expose more vulnerabilities. Every battle taught the humans more about their opponent. Every engagement was a step closer to total control of the conflict. Imperial intelligence officers struggled to understand what was happening. They had underestimated humanity at every level, from tactics to technology to patience. The reports they sent to the Emperor painted a picture of a force that was impossible to beat, one that seemed to anticipate every Imperial move. Panic spread across the council chambers. Finally, one officer delivered a report that would haunt the Empire forever. "Your Majesty," he said, voice trembling, "what we have faced so far represents only a fraction of the Terran military. The main forces, their central fleets and command centers have not even been deployed. What we have seen is nothing. This is only the beginning." The Emperor sat in silence. For centuries he had believed in the invincibility of his empire. Now he understood that he had been wrong. Terran forces were not only capable of fighting the Empire, they were capable of dismantling it entirely. As the final battles raged, humanity's strategy became clear. They did not seek to conquer the Empire. They did not seek vengeance. Their goal was survival, protection of their worlds, and ensuring that no species could ever impose fear or oppression upon them again. Every strike, every maneuver was measured, precise, and purposeful. There was no unnecessary destruction, no chaos, only results. Imperial fleets, once confident, were now desperate. Officers who had once boasted of their experience and strength now whispered in fear. Entire systems had fallen under Terran influence not through conquest, but through careful demonstration of power. Worlds that had been loyal for generations now hesitated to follow Imperial commands. The fear of humans had spread faster than any battle could achieve. In the Outer Rim, small colonies celebrated quietly. They had seen the humans defeat Imperial forces and realized that resistance was possible. Rebellion, once a distant dream, now became a real possibility. The Terrans had shown the galaxy that a small, determined species could stand against the largest empire in existence and survive. Back in Terran command centers, officers prepared the final phase. Every ship, every crew, and every weapon was ready. The main fleets had emerged from deep space, their engines cold but powerful, their weapons primed for battle. Humanity had waited, watched, and learned. Now it was time to bring the Empire to understand the full weight of what they had underestimated for centuries. One final message was sent to all Terran fleets. Phase complete. Engage only when necessary. Minimize casualties. Show them we protect, not destroy. The humans did not seek to humiliate the Empire. They sought to demonstrate that they were not weak, that they could not be bullied, and that their future would not be dictated by fear. Every engagement was precise, every strike carefully chosen. By the time the Empire realized the scale of what they faced, their fleets were already in retreat, scattered and broken, and in the aftermath, the Imperial leaders finally understood what humanity had accomplished. The battles had shown more than strength. They had shown strategy, unity, and the unyielding will to survive. Humanity had defended itself not just through technology, but through intelligence, patience, and courage. Across the galaxy, the survivors of the Empire's fleets returned to their home worlds. Their reports were filled with fear, disbelief, and awe. No one could deny the truth any longer. What the Empire had faced at Epsilon Gate and beyond had been only a fraction of humanity's full might. The humans had revealed themselves not as a small, primitive species, but as a civilization capable of standing against the largest forces in existence and winning. Back on Earth, the people continued their work quietly. Ships were repaired, new fleets were constructed, and defenses strengthened. Humanity had proven its strength, but they knew vigilance was the price of freedom. The galaxy had seen a new power rise, and the lesson had been clear. Underestimating humans was the gravest mistake any civilization could make. In the end, the message was simple and terrifying for the Empire. What they had faced so far was nothing. Humanity's full strength had remained hidden, patiently waiting. And when humanity chose to show it, even the mightiest empire in the galaxy could not stand against it. The war had ended, not with destruction, but with understanding. The Empire learned that fear alone could not command obedience, and that a small, determined species could rewrite the rules of the galaxy. Humanity had survived, protected its worlds, and proven that no matter how small a civilization may seem, its spirit could challenge the greatest powers in existence. And somewhere, far in the deep reaches of space, humanity's fleets rested quietly, engines humming, weapons primed, and crews ready. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Underestimate humans at your peril. The stars were silent, but the humans were watching. And the Empire would never make the same mistake again.